Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'm Shaneé Yvette Willis, Senior Program Officer with the Digital Library Federation, and I'm honored to moderate today's timely conversation, Content, Authenticity, and Provenance in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, a call to action for the LAMS community. We are gathering at a pivotal moment for libraries, archives, and museums. As this report reminds us, trust is the essential currency of our field. Our institutions have long served as stewards of memory, evidence, and knowledge, and today that responsibility is being shaped by the rapid rise of generative AI. With that transformation comes a pressing question for all of us. How do we preserve authenticity, provenance, and public trust in an era where digital content can be changed instantly and sometimes invisibly? Today, we are fortunate to be joined by the authors of this important call to action, Joshua Sternfeld and Kate Murray, who will help us think through both the challenges and the practical pathways forward. Their report offers four powerful pillars: research, collaboration, advocacy, and open sharing as a roadmap for collective action across our community. I'm excited for the conversation ahead and for the insights this community will bring to it. Please join me in welcoming Joshua and Katie. Kate.
Thanks, Shaneé. You read the report, which is great. I feel like you can take it from here. So let me share my screen. Hi everybody, I'm Kate Murray. Oh, someone else is sharing. I'm going to send a share request. There we go. And give me 1 second and we will share. Okay, great. Okay, can you guys see that? Awesome. Okay. Hi everybody. We are very excited to be with you all today to share some high level insights and highlights from our new report. Maybe not so new anymore. It was published in February. It's called Content, Authenticity, and Provenance in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, a call to action for the LAMS community. The URL to download the report is on the screen right now, and Josh will also drop it into chat. We are informal here, so please, feel free to put questions into chat and we'll get to them. And off the bat, we need to thank the other contributors to our paper. This is very much a group effort. I think some of them are here today at this meeting, and we'll include their names later on in the presentation. The Content, Authenticity, and Provenance in the Age of Artificial Intelligence, a call to action for the LAMS community report, is a product of the C2PA for G plus LAM C2PA for G plus LAM Community of Practice, which is organized by the Library of Congress, but it's a collaborative group. That name is actually a bit of a misnomer at this point, actually, because when we started this effort in late 2024, we were looking specifically at C2PA, and we'll talk about C2PA shortly, but we've expanded beyond that. And now we are looking at content authenticity and provenance overall. In fact, we're considering changing our name to a more generic content authenticity and provenance or CAP focus instead of specifically calling out C2PA, but we'll see what happens there. Just a little bit of context for this group. Back in December 2024, the internal Library of Congress AI working group had a briefing about the potential for C2PA across several workflows. This evolved into a larger community briefing in January for about 80 of our closest friends from nearby government agencies, including the National Archives and the Government Publications Office and the National Library of Medicine and Smithsonian. But also we had wider community members like NYPL and IIIF and National Geographic. We had enough momentum at that time to establish an ongoing group with quarterly meetings. The first one, which was in March 2025, sorry. So we are now into our second year. And our main goals for this group are to build awareness for content authenticity and provenance for the G plus LAM community, to create a community of practice, to build use cases and user stories, mostly outside of records management, and return feedback and user stories to C2PA and other specifications to augment their existing collections. Our community notes are available at that link there. We've had a bunch of sub-teams going, and if you want to join our mailing list for updates, feel free to do so. A big part of this G plus LAM effort is community building, and perhaps more importantly, sustainable community building. We've developed a monthly update template that usually goes out in the middle of the month. I think the next one will go out on Friday. So you can drop us a note and get on that list. We also host quarterly community calls, including updates for upcoming meetings and action items and recordings of past meetings. Our next quarterly meeting is on June 12th from 1 to 2:30 p.m. And you can drop a note to ctpa@loc.gov and we'll get you added to that invitation. We also published a blog post about the creation of this community back in July 2025. And we actually just published another blog post yesterday specifically about this report that we'll be talking about in this session. And just to note, Josh will be dropping some links into the slides, but for links that are not visible, like these ones to the blog post, we have a slide later on that spells out what all the links are. And we're happy to share these slides after the presentation today, if there's interest. It's really been great to see how the news of this work has been spread not only by our own efforts, but by members in the community. It's really a great sign that we have a variety of contact points for this work and in a variety of places. Like here, for instance, we are thrilled to be invited, but also the Digital Preservation Coalition, NDSA, YASA. I'm giving a presentation to the National Digital Forum in New Zealand later tonight at 7 p.m., which is like tomorrow there or yesterday there. I forget. But anyway, we're talking to New Zealand later. We also had one at PDF Days Europe and many, many more. So you can reach out to us at any time with questions or to sign up for our updates at ctpa@loc.gov. And our individual emails will also be available later in this presentation. So a quick review of what content authenticity and provenance, or as we call it, CAP or CAP, information is and why it's important, especially as more content is impacted by AI. So you likely know this already, but bear with me to establish a baseline here. These are some short definitions about these overarching concepts, neither of which are new to digital preservation and cultural heritage communities, of course, but what is new is how easy it is for AI to make changes at even the smallest level. So content authenticity means verifying that the digital content is genuine and unaltered. It does not mean that the content is factually correct. And provenance is a verifiable history of digital content that shows its origin and any modifications it has undergone, including signal chain documentation. So as a call to action to the digital preservation community, this report that we're talking about really addresses a critical moment. AI technologies have captured the imagination of archivists, librarians, curators, and scholars in processing and accessing collections at scale. It can maybe do a lot of things really well and also maybe not. But in case you haven't noticed, it's really popular right now and there's no sign of slowing down whatsoever. At the same time, essential content authenticity and provenance principles are at risk of being overlooked. We are witnessing in real time the erosion of public trust in digital content distributed through news and social media as more examples of actual or suspected deepfakes appear daily. Thankfully, that skepticism has not yet encroached upon heritage repositories. But if left unchecked, AI technologies will have the same corrosive impacts on LAM's reputations, which have been established over centuries, and that's not what anyone in our community wants. If LAMs lose our status as carriers of trusted information, we do not fulfill our mission, and no good comes from that. What is clear is that the emergence of AI technologies, especially generative AI, has introduced an entirely new dimension of authentication for LAM's collections content for consideration. This moment demands deliberate, thoughtful, and sustained efforts to document and verify CAP data throughout the digital preservation lifecycle. We acknowledge that the arrival of new technologies does not mean that we should abandon our preservation principles, but rather adapt them for a new contingency. As we mentioned previously, CAP is not at all new to LAM's environments. These are foundational principles for our communities. We have lots of examples of how we've implemented CAP. We've been doing this all along. However, informed, deliberate, and updated implementations of CAP are taking on new relevance with AI-impacted data because we need to be able to document how this object came to be in the form that it is now. The relationship between CAP and AI is not unprecedented, but it's an extension of longstanding preservation concerns within a technical terrain. The central question has always been how to document change responsibly while sustaining trust. What has changed is the speed, scale, and visibility of information, combined with communicating CAP beyond institutional walls. One thing that really struck me recently was a conversation with an industry leader who's that some media consumers are starting to think that all data and all content is AI generated unless they're told it's not. So this was a gut punch for me, in part because it demonstrates how quickly the tide is turning from maybe there's some AI in here somewhere to maybe there's a human in here somewhere. This was all moving so quickly. It's quite astonishingly so. So I'm going to turn it over to Josh for a bit of a deeper dive about how we as a community can respond and engage.
Great. Thank you, Kate. And thank you again. I want to echo Kate's gratitude to DLF to providing this forum. As Kate mentioned, this is exactly the intent or the purpose behind the report. And so it's wonderful to have you all here today. And I look forward to some questions and discussion, as well as all of the questions and discussions that we've been encountering along the way. So in laying out the pillars of our call to action for the LAMS community, it was important that we acknowledge some of the research and development in the AI and CAP space. I'd like to think of the two examples I'm about to show you here as ensuring trust at opposite ends of the spectrum. The first at the moment of preservation, and the second at the moment of access. So what you see here is the Starling Lab, which represents a collaboration between Stanford University and the USC Shoah Foundation. Employing what they call authenticity by design, the project team is exploring how to encrypt digital assets and their metadata at the point of capture, and applying blockchain technology to ensure its integrity through decentralized storage. So in their experiments with finding solutions to securing metadata, the Starling Lab is one of many examples of working with C2PA. We are beginning to see real-world deployment of C2PA's content credentials within consumer technologies. Content credentials are the cryptographically signed data that implements the C2PA specification to provide verifiable information about a digital object's origin and editing history. We talked earlier about adoption updates, and it's continuing to grow. And to be clear, our report is not intended as an endorsement of C2PA over the possibility of other solutions. It's one option, but at the moment, it's the dominant option. So given that more and more users are seeking to access heritage information via AI models, Model Context Protocol is an open standard first developed by Anthropic, but now overseen by the Linux Foundation, that invites institutions to develop tools that reliably connect large language models directly to trusted data sets. I'd like to spend a quick minute here explaining MCP and why it will likely play an important function for LAMS, but if we have time, I've developed a little bit of a demo. It turns out that MCP happens to get most of the questions when we raise it during our presentations. So I thought I'd take an opportunity to kind of walk you through a little bit of what that looks like in action. But in a high level, here's how the process works. Think of MCP as the protocol that establishes a gateway between a database and an LLM. You ask a question in the form of a chatbot text prompt. The LLM translates that prompt into a request to retrieve data that is readable by an MCP server, which then retrieves the relevant data from a database. Once the data is retrieved, the process runs in reverse. The server delivers the data back to the LLM, which interprets that data and synthesizes it into a response for the user. So why am I bringing up MCP in terms of CAP? Well, MCP can function as the gateway to accessing reliable provenance data created by practitioners, thus reducing, but as we will see in a moment, not eliminating altogether the possibility of model-generated hallucinations and distortions. In its most ideal state, MCP can enable a library, archive, or museum to connect its collections data to an LLM such as Claude, Gemini, or an assortment of open source models. This represents the first step of the dream scenario in which a researcher can use a computer to chat with a historical collection regardless of its size and scope. So I'm going to leave MCP for the moment and move on to some of the core findings of our report. So as previously mentioned, and you all know, content, authenticity, and provenance are not new to the LAMS community. The emergence of AI technologies, however, has scrambled the landscape, challenging long-held practices, approaches to transparency, and the relationship between the public and private sectors. Our report identifies 3 interrelated challenges that demand sustained collective action. The first challenge is institutional capacity. As the impact of AI unfolds in real time, institutions face difficult questions about near-term and long-term staffing and skills development, upgrading hardware and content management systems, security, and systems interoperability within and beyond the LAMS community. AI also introduces new layers of privacy and ethics risks to CAP data. Preservation practitioners are discovering how provenance data that records AI-assisted enhancement, reconstruction, or interpretation could inadvertently surface information that conflicts with ethical commitments, donor agreements, or community protocols. Without human review, there's a risk that automated provenance signals will be treated as authoritative endorsements rather than as structured disclosures, leading users to place too much trust in AI-processed representations of cultural heritage materials. The third challenge acknowledges the unprecedented pace at which AI systems and models are evolving. When Kate and I first released the report back in January, February, agentic AI was just beginning to gain traction, and it was not entirely clear what the implications would be. In just a few months, agentic AI has come to dominate discourse and development. The idea is that users will deploy agents with specific capabilities to interact with other agents, including those capable of retrieving information from LAMs. There's so much to unpack here, but for the moment, what I want to stress is that when you strip away all of the hype and convoluted language, what is happening is a rewiring of knowledge ecosystems. And those ecosystems will not and cannot survive if we do not trust the information outputs. So these 3 challenges led us to develop a set of 4 pillars that comprise our call to action to administrators and practitioners. We purposefully selected areas that ought to feel familiar to the community to reinforce long-standing CAP principles. The first pillar incites coordinated research and development that balances theory and practice to develop sustainable standards, workflows, tools, and platforms. In addition to the practical approaches to CAP I mentioned earlier, international research teams such as Inter-Pares Trust have yielded considerable understanding of AI-impacted CAP through numerous case studies, analysis of AI tools, and revisions to long-standing CAP concepts. The second pillar calls for dedicated partnerships and collaborations, something that should already feel familiar to the LAMS community. We have been in close contact, for example, with the Digital Object Authenticity Working Group and the Trust in Archives initiative. The advantages of institutional collaboration are numerous, including the potential to build economies of scale, resources, and attention. Our third pillar encourages the LAMS community to leverage their expertise and reputation as trusted institutions to advocate with industry and vendors for rigorous CAP standards and protocols. LAMs are uniquely suited to join existing industry-led groups in developing open and shared specifications that can strengthen content authentication. User stories, such as those produced by the C2PA G+ LAM group and submitted to the C2PA working group, can inform industry-led initiatives of CAP-related areas that otherwise might have been overlooked. And with that, I think I'm going to hand it back to Kate.
Yeah, hi everybody. I hope you heard me clearing my throat there, thinking I was on mute. I was not on mute, but so now I'm off mute and I'm chatting with you all again. So, Josh, I'm going to pop back in here for a slide or two to talk about some direct advocacy and community engagement related to this pillar that Josh mentioned earlier. So, Josh covered a little bit about this, but a bit of vocabulary review here. So C2PA, which we've mentioned a number of times, stands for the Coalition for Content Provenance and Authenticity, right? So it's the technical specification authoring body. It's actually part of the portfolio of digital trust projects within the Linux Foundation umbrella through the Joint Development Foundation. But content credentials are the cryptographically signed data. It's basically a manifest. What really content credentials is technical metadata. They never use that phrase, but that's really what it is, right? So it's the cryptographically signed data that implements the C2PA specification. And it provides verifiable information about a piece of digital content's origin and editing history. Essentially, C2PA creates the rules and the framework, and content credentials are the products that follow those rules. But honestly, people, including me, use these two terms, C2PA and content credentials, interchangeably for better or for worse. So C2PA is one of the leading proponents and support structures for content authenticity and provenance data. It's growing in adoption, but it's complicated and it's not designed for digital preservation at all. We had certainly, in our conversations with them, they are thrilled to learn about our field, but it was not designed for digital preservation. But definitely keep this on your horizon. It's already implemented in most cell phones, and it's in Ring cameras and YouTube videos and Google Images and many scanner manufacturers. So you are likely already generating and carrying this data without even knowing it. Through the C2PA for G+ LAM group, we've had strong interest on both sides. So from both the specification authors and the users and implementers. C2PA has been very receptive to comments from the digital preservation community already. We submitted some initial feedback on the specification, which was accepted into the next version. And we also have a meeting coming up with a man named Eric Sevlich. I'm sure I'm pronouncing his name incorrectly, but he reached out to us, and he's the co-chair of the C2PA textual provenance group and the author of that part of the specification. He's interested in digital preservation needs for textual content, including OCR content. We have a call coming up with him a week from Friday, April 24th. I think it's at 10 a.m. And email c2pa@loc.gov if you would like that meeting invitation. We would love to have you join us. A key place to track updates about C2PA is in their GitHub repo. This is where I often get hints that a new specification version is published or about to be published. One was just published April 1st. They don't seem to announce it anywhere. You just have to kind of be aware. I get a bunch of notifications from GitHub, and I immediately go to the repo to see what's happening. Also a note that C2PA in its GitHub repo has a public test file section. It's not necessarily current, and there are no key file types like audio and video. I actually had a chat with folks just this week, and this is a known issue that they are lacking sample files, and it is certainly a priority. FADGI, if I put on my FADGI hat, so I lead the federal agency's digital guidelines initiative. I forgot my own acronym, FADGI. I lead their audio and visual working group. And we are working with colleagues Dave Rice and Jerome Martinez and others to develop public test files, especially for AV content. So we'll be adding them to this public repo, or certainly another public repo if possible. So this is a specific example of where the digital preservation community can contribute with open and public sample content. Another thing I wanted to chat about briefly is that we mentioned before, C2PA is not the only way to think about content authenticity and provenance documentation. It's one way, but it's not. But there are certainly others. So as the leader of the FADGI Audiovisual Working Group, we have an allied effort happening right now to develop tiered community recommendations for content authenticity and provenance data. In part, this is in recognition that not everyone can or wants to implement C2PA, so let's look at some other options. And for this, FADGI is taking an organizational perspective, and it's based on the levels, NDSA levels of digital preservation, that structure with criteria and different levels. So that screenshot there on the left is demonstrate that the project is still very much in flux here, right? We're very much in discussion, but you can see that we're working on parsing out the various criteria and levels. The screenshot is kind of illegible on purpose so that you don't get like stuck in the details about it, because it will certainly change. But it's more of a proof of life thing that this work is actually ongoing. We have actually a meeting about it on Friday. We expect to be wrapped up with this work in June. The screenshot on the right is the official FADGI landing page, which is public, and there'll be much more information about it there. We expect to have this finalized in June, and you'll see it everywhere, and we'll have a chance to weigh in when we are a bit further along. We're happy to come back to chat with DLF or any other organization once it's more firmed up. But the goal is to demonstrate that CIP can be implemented in a variety of ways. CIP being one, C2PA being one of them, But there are also other levels of completeness and robustness in other forms like embedded metadata or fixity logs or premise or maybe JPEG Trust or something called ISCC, which is the International Standard Content Code, or even Synth ID, which is a Google watermark tool. But there are other options depending on your institutional goals and resources. So I'm going to hand it back to Josh to bring us to our next pillars.
Great. And the projects that Kate covered bring us to the fourth and final pillar, and that really has to do with communication and outreach. So our report advocates for the LAMS community to embrace radically transparent modes of communication. There's just so much information coming out at one time, and that means sharing findings that expose not only solutions but also shortcomings or failures. So we're not advocating for the LAMS community to abandon academic publications, edited anthologies, and essential work conducted by professional associations, but we rather recommend pairing that work with all available modes of instant communication, including blog posts, webinars, Slack channels, and communities of practice based on areas of interest, content geography, or institution type. For example, we have our pals over at the AI for LAM. They have a fancy new website, and we recommend you to check them out. And also to say that the Fantastic Futures 2026 program will be happening here in Washington, D.C. In September. There is a call for papers. There's like one more day. I think it's tomorrow. So I encourage you all to check that out and submit anything from, I think, a poster to presentation, panel, and so forth. So let's see. So Kate has put a number of the links here. We will send out a PDF of the slides, and at the beginning of the presentation, I included some of those links already. So there will be a number of opportunities to get all of the various things that we're talking about. And if you miss all of those, then you can email either of us, and we would be happy to get that to you. So the C2PA G+LAM group set out to address a question that looms over every library, archive, and museum. Amidst rapid AI developments, the question was, what should my institution do? Of course, there is no one-size-fits-all solution. Our goal with the call to action was to provide a working framework that both validates concerns while offering a roadmap for navigating turbulent times. What is becoming clearer by the day is that the AI revolution is really a revolution in knowledge, how it's stored, accessed, and ultimately interpreted. So far, many of the most popular systems, such as LLMs, have mostly progressed on unstructured data. But for things to truly take off, what is needed is information that is structured, contextualized, and ultimately reliable. So if nothing else, we want to emphasize that all of us have a role to play to ensure that such information can be authenticated and verified. And you see here the other contributors that we're extremely thankful for. They did yeoman's work in keeping the project moving, and we are eternally grateful and thankful for their contributions. So with that, I think it's a good time to open up to some questions. And as I hinted at a little bit earlier, I'd like to leave maybe about 10 minutes or so to walk you through the joys and trials and tribulations of model context protocol, and that should be fun as well.
Thank you so much, Josh and Kate, for such a thoughtful and urgent conversation, especially lifting up C2PA and helping translate that, this highly technical framework for its relevance for lambs and glams. I shared in the chat that all DLF events are governed by our code of contact. And with that in mind, I'd love to bring the community into the conversation. We have a question in the chat about a previous slide. I encourage you all to use the chat or raise your hand in Zoom and I'll invite you to come on screen if that's something you're interested in, and
think
we could
I
just use the
think
chat.
it looks like Helen McNamara had a question about
Yeah,
yeah
the
about
slide.
yeah. So the what you saw, I don't know, Kate, if you can pull up that slide. Um,
Yeah, pull
we
it back up one sec.
we try our best to cite all of the images and such that we pull through. And we wanted to avoid a situation where we would give the appearance of promoting various vendors that are developing CMS systems around AI capabilities. And so this is, welcome to the new world, a generated AI image through Gemini's Nano Banana. And it was some series of prompts that was saying, develop the appearance of a CMS working with historical artifacts. And again, it was mostly to convey the idea of what these systems tend to look like, which is a combination of the traditional metadata combined with AI assistants and so forth, layered within on top of the metadata that gives the capacity to ask questions and interrogate the collection of metadata in various ways. But yes, completely generated.
So I just put into the chat. I can pull up what an example like C2PA manifest would look like, if that is helpful. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing so you don't see me going through my notes, but I'll be back in just one second. I feel like you can chat amongst yourselves while I do this. I'll be I'll
Happy
be
to
with you in one
relay
sec.
other questions. And again, if there's no other questions at the moment, after Kate shares some information about the specification, we can talk a little about MCP as well.
Oops. Okay, I'm going to share some slides from a different presentation, but it'll just give you an idea of what a manifest looks like. So hold on one sec. Okay, so this is I could go into a lot more detail about like the structures around C2PA and what it's things are defined by actions, assertions, which is in a rough equivalent to a premise event, if you kind of think of it that way. But this is what a sample manifest is an extracted bit of a sample manifest might look like, right? So it is talking about, just a sec. So here we have the description of what happened, the reason why it happened, when it happened, the agents that were involved in it, what the digital source type, this whole thing around digital source types, which I won't go into necessarily, but and at what level those changes happened. So a CGPA manifest, which again is the equivalent of technical metadata, as you can see here, is can be at any level of implementation. So you could be doing it on an individual slice of a video or a pixel in a still image, or you could be doing it on one audio track within a larger within a file, or you could do it at a file level, or you could do it at a bag level, right? So there's any number of ways that you could implement what a manifest would look like. And so yeah, so this is just an example of how that data might look structured. The challenge, I think, the big value, I think, for the digital preservation community around C2PA, understanding that it's not made for the digital preservation community, is that a manifest can then be like digitally signed by an external trust center, right? So when this, oh, sorry.
No, sorry, I'm clear
Oh,
my thing.
no, go. It's contagious, Josh. So by an external trust center, so that you could distribute the file, the content file, as well as the manifest, that could either be embedded in the file or as held as a sidecar file. And then this could be verified through an external trust center that it has not changed, right? So you could think of it as kind of a fixity value, but it's much more robust than a fixity value. And it has defined structures to document how AI has impacted this file, right? Which is an advantage over some of other things like potentially premise or or even other types of embedded metadata. But not everyone can do something as complicated as C2PA. And I will say, if we haven't said this strongly enough already, the Library of Congress has not said that we will implement C2PA, right? We are investigating, but we have not adopted it. We have not said that we're adopting it. We're just exploring it. And we're happy to explore it with all of you. So this is kind of what a manifest looks like. And they can be very long, and you can be changing them with like anytime there's some kind of an event kind of action. You can be updating it. So there's, I think, a lot of flexibility around implementation depending on what your situation is. But it is not the only way. There's lots of other ways to do this. So I'll stop sharing this. So correct. So I see so like premise event is a little bit about who, is that a question about the reason value? So C2BA has in each of its things called actions assertions, there are basically a separate set of metadata tags. And reason is one of those. I'm not sure I'm answering that question correctly, but it has defined reasons why you're doing that. Oh, so that's a good question. You are people. This is why we need people in the loop, right? So I mean, there can be some control vocabulary options, but there can also be yeah. So you could develop a control vocabulary to do that however you wanted to do it. Yeah. So I think I'll stop talking there. I wouldn't. I'd be happy to come back and give a more in-depth discussion about C2PA. Yeah, you're welcome. About C2PA, or please join us at the G plus LAM working group. We'd love to have you, and we can do it like a little bit more of an in-depth dive there. You can look through all of our notes, which are open and recordings, and you can hear me clear my throat in any number of recordings, I'm sure, and there as well. So if you don't have more questions, Josh, do you want to talk a little bit about more MCPs? But please continue to put questions in chat. Should I share my screen, Josh?
Yes, please. That would be great.
All right, Josh, I'm going to scroll down. You're going to tell me.
No problem. That one. Perfect. So, okay. Model context protocol. And again, if there are questions that come up, please, I'm happy to, stop and answer things along the way. But here's how an MCP exchange that I mentioned during our presentation might work for historical collections. So, okay, so you type a query requesting information pertaining to the collection within your LLM, Claude, Gemini, ChatGPT, etc. And the model accesses a designated institution's collection data, whether in the form of descriptive metadata, catalog records, finding aids, full text, or the digital objects themselves. So the advantage is that unlike traditional search, which relies upon identifying the exact terms that you hope will yield optimal results, the LLM allows for more open-ended or ambiguous queries. An MCP-directed exchange can translate your historical query, however vague, and open multiple entry points into the data. Like typical LLM chats, a user can engage with the LLM in a more conversational context, asking follow-up questions and probing for additional information that may otherwise not surface as readily in a typical keyword search approach. So, okay, so this is how it works a little bit, and then I'll walk you through an example. The first thing you need to, so this is how I set up an MCP server, and I have no coding, no programming experience, and I too can set this up. So there is hope for us non-programmers out there. But the first thing you need is access to an API. And so for this example, I chose LOC's Chronicling America API, which is 100% free. And if you go to their API page, the site explains that the API provides structured data in JSON and YAML formats. Some APIs will require you to retrieve a unique key, sometimes free, sometimes not. So the incredible thing about setting up the server is that you don't need to have coding experience. And in this case, you don't even need, just to say, I used Claude Code to create my MCP server. Pretty sure a lot of the other frontier models have the same capability. And I used the pro paid version of Claude Code. So you don't even need to direct Claude to the actual code itself. So you can see this is my initial prompt. And I simply indicated I wanted to create a Chronicling America MCP server, and I included the README page, the page that you saw on the previous slide. And Claude was able to handle the rest. It scoured the page and documentation and documented all of the information that it needed. And that was when we were off to the races. So the key structure to understand about MCP servers is that they work by creating what are called tools. Each tool is designed to conduct a specific type of search and retrieval of the database. So for Chronicling America, the README page lists the types of search parameters that are possible, and that you can see on the left, maybe a bit small. Examples include searching by title, issue, page, terms, dates, and so forth. So then Claude Code is able to translate that information into the MCP tools, which you see on the right. And as a user, it's important to understand which tools have been created because it will determine how to structure your prompts. Once Claude has surveyed the API, it will begin to code the server directly into your desktop app. And periodically, it will ask you permission to dig into your file system, which can be a little scary. But as far as security risks go, this particular type of MCP server is pretty low key in terms of accessing your own file structure. So the search tools I showed you are the foundational tools, but Claude Code, right after it developed its first version of the server, is so sophisticated now that it proceeded to start suggesting additional functionalities that you can layer into your server. It recommended chaining searches around a historic event or developing a heat map of geographic coverage of newspapers, which would help contextualize where crime is stronger and weakest in its coverage. You could also develop a kind of Google Ngram style tracker that will show the frequency a term is used over time. You can create an historical narrative. You can conduct multilingual search, since that's one of the great strengths of Chronicling America is all of the different languages that are represented in the resource. And you can also build semantic search, and I know using RAG, and I know some folks will ask, oh, differences between RAG and MCP, and we don't have time to go into that, but if you want to have a RAG versus MCP, I'm happy to have that conversation at a later point, because it gets really interesting. So getting the server up and running was not without its hiccups, which is to be expected. What's incredible is that the troubleshooting that was necessary can be measured in minutes, not hours and days. First bump I discovered was when I tested the server was that it was unable to connect to the API. And that happened to be because LOC had recently migrated the database. And so Claude had to, on its own, update the server and point the server to the new endpoint structure. Where it gets a bit more complicated is discovering how the server tools operate and how they differ from conventional search methods that we're all accustomed to using. So Claude admitted that the search results that it retrieved involved what it characterized as, quote, judgment calls, based on its analysis of where a topic appeared on a page. This is the technical side, and we'll talk about the contextual side in a minute. But what I learned was that after the server searched for a term and retrieved a hit on a page, it would analyze the topic surrounding the search term to determine its relevancy. The problem is that at first, its parameters were limited to reviewing the first 8,000 characters on a page. So if the search term appeared beyond that point, it would create an erroneous contextualization based on the limited parameters and basically overlook that possibility as a search hit. So in other words, if you go to Chronicling America now, when you view a search result, it will display the words that immediately precede and proceed it, which gives you at least an idea of its relevance. And when I explained to Claude that this is what I desired, it updated its parameters to accommodate the full text on a page. And this is the wild thing about all of this, right? In the iterative development process, you can chat with Claude and explain why something isn't working properly. And so I bounced back and forth between Claude Chat, which was the side of Claude that accesses the LLM, accesses the database, with the Claude Code, which updates the MCP server. So when I discovered an error testing the system in Claude Chat, I requested that it draft an explanation of the error in language that Claude Code would understand. And then I just cut and paste that language back into Claude Code, and it updated the MCP server code. So very quickly, I want to walk you through what this looks like. Having recently watched the film Greatest Showman with my family, starring Hugh Jackman, I was curious to conduct a search about P.T. Barnum. Specifically, I was interested in tracing the press coverage of the year-long tour across the country with famed singer Jenny Lind from 1850 to 51. So the first prompt that I gave it was intentionally a bit vague in terms of context. I simply asked, I'm curious how the newspapers in Chronicling America covered P.T. Barnum's tour with singer Jenny Lind. Can you compile a set of reviews that helps track the tour? So within a few minutes, Claude identified 4 reviews in different locations that covered the tour from start to finish. It then generated a 6-page summary that provided an introduction, the full text of the 4 articles, and with extra prompting, the links to the articles on the site. And I'll provide these materials when we send the PDF out. It's really interesting to read through. So what immediately struck me as an historian was how Claude went directly to selecting 4 articles out of dozens, if not hundreds, of possible hits. When I prompted Claude further to provide a comprehensive list of search results, it indicated that there was over 100. Instead of listing all 100, however, it provided an additional filter of what it called strong hits, and then an additional prompt. It created the full list and separated what it called strong hits with weaker hits. The filtering process is what's unique to LLMs, requires much more work to understand. But I circled back around to the original 4 articles it identified, and I asked how it selected those. I was curious whether it used pre-trained knowledge about Barnum to guide its search, or if the full search was derived from searching Chronicling America or the web. It conceded that it indeed took a shortcut based on its pre-training. It knew in advance the overall arc of the tour history, and from that predetermined narrative, it pinpointed articles that matched the points in the tour that were likely most significant. In other words, before it searched Chronicling America, it decided in advance how it would conduct its search. In its explanation, admitted that a researcher approaching this purely inductively, letting the newspaper corpus tell them which moments generated the most coverage, might have landed on different events. So there's a lot to take away from this one exchange, but what I wanted to leave you with are a few high-level implications, especially when we're considering impact on maintaining trust through content authentication and provenance. The first takeaway is that setting up an MCP server will likely require multiple rounds of development. Depending on the plan you use and the complexity of the server, you may run into token limits, which requires you to momentarily pause. And even when the server is operational, it may not behave in the way that you predict it would behave. It will retrieve results and present them as definitive, when in fact it may have overlooked many results based on its search and retrieval parameters. And perhaps the most important takeaway for both librarians and users is that a search is neither objective nor comprehensive. In fact, unless you provide your own contextual guidance, it will inject its own context based on its pre-training. In terms of CAP, the risk to trust happens more on the downstream side of this process. The information retrieved is reliable since it comes directly from the database, but the interpretive layer, the LLM, adds to the search parameters and interpretation of results reintroduces the potential for errant framing. So all this is to suggest that we are on the cusp of a new kind of information literacy that will have ramifications for collections development and research. So I will stop there.
So we're coming up on the end of our time, so we would love to hear additional questions, but here's your takeaway. AI is impacting your collections right now, right? If you haven't had pressure from your like folks in digitization who are doing scanning and deskewing and that kind of stuff, you will soon enough. And content that is coming into your collections will have AI impacts. So you got to figure out what is going to be your approach to documenting those interactions and their impacts, right? So there are probably going to be a number of ways to do it. And because of the rapid pace of change in this environment, I mean, even since we published this back in February, it's now April, there have been very significant advances in the AI community, right? So the longer you wait, the more expensive it's going to be. We know it's scary. Like we know that the thought of AI is scary, but there's a lot of opportunity there as well as risk for sure. But the onus on our collaborative community is to think, how are we in the LAMS community going to approach it, right? We don't want to have a bunch of boutique situations. Let's try to work with industry. Let's try to work within the frameworks that we already have and figure it out, because that's going to enable tool development and our vendors and all this kind of thing. So yeah, sooner rather than later, because it's already here. So
Yeah.
that's my thought. Josh, I'll stop talking.
No, yeah, and I was just going to add, yeah, Kate has it exactly right, and I will just add, I've had conversations with various sectors, the journalism community most recently, and there is a sort of expectation that the lambs community will have it all figured out, and journalists or whomever will just be able to access this data, and they'll send their agent out there, and it will magically pull all of the data that they need to produce their investigative journalism. So all by way of saying, this has to be collaborative. They are hungry. Other sectors are hungry for the community, the lambs community, to participate, collaborate, and take their much wisdom and help shape how these systems will operate.
There's a question in chat that I was typing, and then I'll just say it because I can talk faster than I can type. And it's about, is there a tool to create the manifests for CGPA? And the short answer is it depends what the content type is, right? So CGPA currently is very strong in support for images, a little bit on document types, but very strong support for images. And there are a couple of tools that support that and can do some validation on that. For audiovisual stuff, not so much, but we are working as part of the FADGI group. Our colleagues, Dave Rice and Jerome Martinez, are working to develop that capacity in BWF Meta Edit, which is a open source tool for audio files. Media Info, another fantastic tool that they support. Recognizes C2PA manifest data, that the C2PA chunk, how it's incorporated in individual file types can be a little complicated. One of the things that we're working with the communities, with the C2PA community on is, okay, so they have instructions for potentially how C2PA could be supported in file types, but going back to the other side, like going back to the file type, the file specification authors of folks like Broadcast Wave or Matroska, is to write it in on the file specification side. So there's a little crosswalk there. So in short answer is, yeah, some tools are already available. It's uneven, and it depends on your the file type. Yeah, you're welcome. Please feel free to reach out to Josh and I at any time, or cgpa@lock.gov, and we'll get back to you. Also, I'd encourage you, if you're interested in joining the G+LAM community, you are welcome. Just let us know. You'll get our update, which has this and more exciting information about content authenticity and provenance. And we are happy to provide the slides.
I'm looking through the chat to see if we have any more questions. We're getting a lot of thank yous. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you to you both for sharing your expertise and really underlining the importance of collaboration in the face of rapid change. Thank you to everyone who joined us today for your questions and your attention. We'll be adding the Zoom recording to the DLF events page along with the slides that Josh and Kate share with us with their permission. We're really grateful to be able to provide these kind of events about emerging technologies and be in conversation with you. And we look forward to more opportunities to do this together. Thank you all again and have a wonderful rest of your day. Be well.
Thanks all.
Thank you, Shaneé.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.